ITS America Conference and Expo. Why are you here? What brings you here?
So, my name is HollyAnna Littlebull. I'm from Yakama Nation, a federally recognized tribe in South Central Washington. And I'm here because Dr. Sun from Awasian invited me and told me that this was a conference that we should be attending. And I'd never even heard of ITS America before he mentioned it. And so we made the plans, and here I am, and I'm like blown away. Some of the stuff that we've been talking about is stuff that's all people are already doing. But I think we should go back to how I met Dr. Sun before he was a doctor. We were working on projects. Yakama Nation has the highest number of fatalities and the highest number for pedestrians and motor vehicles in Washington State. We have the deadliest highway in Washington State, Highway 97. And so we were advised to team up with University of Washington, the STAR Lab, with Dr. Yin-Hai Wang, and he was running it at the time, and he still is. And so we called, we talked, we had some conversations, and we teamed up, and now we're just like on the fly. I mean, that was 4 or 5 years ago, and we've started a pilot project. We were awarded a US DOT grant to create a data portal to help us solidify those holes in the data, because when you're an Indian tribe from North America, it's not always easy to get information that you want, because federally recognized tribes, the data doesn't always go where you want it to. So the tribal police send the data to the state, but sometimes that data doesn't make it there. And sometimes it's not consistent. And so we know like there's 3 occupants, but we don't know which direction they were traveling. We don't know what were some of the factors that occurred, because when we see the data from the state, all it tells us is the time of day, the number of occupants, and if there was a fatality or serious injury, but it doesn't tell us which person in the car, if there was more than one, who got hurt or who got killed. So we had all these holes, and we're trying to, when you're trying to get funding, you're trying to paint a picture, but if your picture has holes in it, kind of like a puzzle, you're missing key pieces that people want to give you funding. They want to know the data. And for us, it's not just data. When you live and work on an Indian reservation or a Native American reservation in the United States, some of the things that happen are, I come from being a first responder. I was a first responder for 30 years. I worked first as a firefighter, then as a medic, then as a police officer, and then I worked in Homeland Security. And so one of the things that happens when you live and work in a small community, those dots are not just dots, they're people. And unfortunately, I've had my cousins killed in car accidents, my classmate in high school. Last July, my sister was killed by a drunk driver. And, my husband was on duty. He's a police officer. He's a sergeant with the tribal police. He was actually there with her. And so I knew what was going on at the time, because people called me to tell me what was happening. And I was out of state. And so I knew what was going to happen, because he goes, this is one of those calls. And I knew what kind of call he meant. And so I knew she was not going to be here by the time I got back. And so when I'm telling people our story, I don't just talk about the dots on a map. I talk about the people, the families, the farmer's son or the farmer's wife, the farm workers. We had a really horrific case recently where a farm worker was killed, and they were from Honduras, and it was a father and a daughter who were coming to do farm work, agricultural work, because Yakama Valley is home to a $1.98 billion agricultural industry. You have farm vehicles, you have freight trucks, you have farm workers all on the road that were built for roads in like 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so when you have roads that aren't built for today's standards, and you have today's vehicles on those roads, it basically destroys the roads, because they're not built for the weight, they're not built for the width. And you're looking at issues of today with yesterday's standards. And I'm not just talking about yesterday, I'm talking about historical standards. And so it's really complicated when you live and work on a tribe, especially if you have a treaty right and a treaty obligation from the US government, and they are not abiding by those promises. This is just another thing that people are used to hearing. Oh, the US isn't keeping their promise. Well, if they're not keeping their promise to the Native Americans of the United States, why should you believe they're going to keep a promise to you? Because if they break our promises, then they're probably going to break somebody else's promises. And that's just not right. It's not right. But we're used to it not being fair. We're used to clawing and digging and fighting for funding that should be given to us. And it's not. And that's fine. I'm not going to wait for them to fix what they broke. I'm going to fight for that funding. I'm going to fight for the grants. I'm going to try to get teammates like University of Washington Star Lab, AWASIAN, which was developed out of the UW Star Lab because they have this program called Promotion, and they helped them turn it into a business. And so we have a must sensor that they developed in the UW Star Lab that will monitor the deadliest intersection on the reservation, which was installed. And so they're giving us data. They're giving us data about traffic volume, freight volume, pedestrians, passenger vehicles, which direction they're traveling, the weather, the humidity, those kind of things that will help tell us what are the road surface conditions at that time. And so we have this pilot project going. Personally, I would love to have like 20 to 50 of these sensors because our reservation is big. From the lower valley floor, the area where I focus on where all the roads are, is approximately 25 miles north to south. East to west, you're looking at about approximately 55 miles. That's a lot of road. That's 9,000 square acres. You're looking at 17 times the size of the city of Seattle. Our roads aren't as condensed as theirs, but when you're looking at a size that large and you have me as the only one working in traffic safety, but we team up. I don't believe any one person can solve one issue. We have a team. My team is Portia Shields, who's our GIS tech manager. We have Dwayne Valentine, who's our engineer. We have our program that helps us because I'm not only responsible for the roads that people drive on every day, I'm also responsible for the Wapto irrigation access roads, for the safety. Those roads are all dirt roads. And you're looking at drains, you're looking at mains, you're looking at canals, and some of these are extremely steep and extremely deep with fast-moving water. And people are using these roads to drive on, to walk on, to ride their horses on. We still have horseback riders. And so the West is not dead, neither are Native Americans. But we have all these multimodal transportation already, but just not by today's standards, the original standards. And so when I look at our reservation, the tribal population is the minority on the reservation. A lot of people don't know that. We only make up 5% of the population on the reservation. The rest of it is non-native. And so when I do my job, I'm not just looking at the safety for my fellow tribal members or other tribal members from other tribes. I'm also looking out for the safety of those farm workers, the farmers, their families, and everybody else. You know, people who work in the hospitals, the first responders, especially because coming from being a first responder, that's, you know, they're a key piece in making sure that people make it from an incident to the hospital safely. But if we don't look out for them, you know, we're breaking the system, and you can't have that. All the dominoes that line up have to be taken care of. And if there's not one domino there, we know what happens. It doesn't necessarily fall the way it's supposed to. And so what I'm trying to do is align those standards and policies and procedures. My office is helping me. The tribe is helping me. Tribal Council and our department did a safety plan, which was approved by Tribal Council. And it was a of work that was done collectively by Eastern Washington University, Margot Hill, and our department. And at that time it was Al Pinkham, Portia Shields, and Dwayne Valentine. They did the safety plan before I came into this position. And then when I came into this position, because tribal council mandated they wanted a tribal traffic safety coordinator, which they created the position I work in now. And they also decided that they wanted a tribal traffic safety committee. And that committee comprises of about 50 different departments in the Yakama Nation, which includes like the tribal police, the courts, behavioral health, the alcohol program, the drug program, all these different programs that come together to talk about the issues on the reservation. That meeting got heard about by the farmers. So there, what we have is a Friends of Tribal Traffic Safety. They send one representative, and they report back to these 12 different farm organizations about what we're working on. Because even they were frustrated that the county and the state were not, at that time, were not taking care of the issues on the reservation, because they were driving on them and their workers were getting hit, their families were getting hit at intersections. And so it was just, everybody knew there was a problem, but there wasn't quite a solution yet, but we're working on that. So now that committee invites WashDOT to the table, the South Central office located in Union Gap, and they have been doing a phenomenal job working with us and addressing the issues to reduce the fatalities and serious injuries on the reservation. We've teamed up and got an MOU with Yakama County now, which is huge. You know, that's a first time thing that hasn't happened in the past. We're working with Toppenish City. We're working with National Park Service to address pedestrian safety. We put together a concept plan that was approved by Tribal Council, which we are going to build over 150 miles of pedestrian safety corridor. And that is so huge because WashDOT and Yakama Nation cooperatively applied for a RAISE grant, and we got $1 million. And then the Olympia office applied for a Connecting Communities grant on behalf of Heritage Connectivity Trails, and they got awarded $300,000. So before we've even been 5 years into that plan, we've got $1.3 million to start planning. And if it wasn't for National Park Service and their technical assistance grant, we wouldn't be where we are. And so I think that just rings true to, you have to reach out to people like this and say, hey, we have this problem, help us find a solution. And that's what happens. And that's how I ended up here, is because, you know, somebody said, hey, come to this conference and come check it out. And I'm like, holy smokes, you know, my mind just went boom. Wow. And that was in the second session of the first day. I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. This is what we need. You know, and I didn't even know it was part of the software we already have. So it's a free thing. It's a free tool. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell us? I had to come to Texas.
I'm glad you're here now.
I know.
So when did you start? Your title is traffic safety coordinator.
Correct.
Yeah. And so when did that new role got created?
Correct.
Because there was this problem with traffic safety.
Yeah.
So how did you come into that role, and when was that?
So I believe it was in 2017 or 18. I think it was 18. The Washington Traffic Safety Commission created these positions under a grant, and Yakama Nation had heard about it, so they applied for that grant and they got awarded that money, and so that paid for my position, and it gave some funding to help start the process of becoming traffic safety. And so one of the requirements in that grant application was that when I came into this position, I had to apply for one grant in a year. I applied for every grant that I could possibly apply for, because I knew going to college, I applied for every scholarship I could apply for, and I figured if I get 99 no's and I get one yes, that's one yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did with this job, is I was like, I will apply, and try to help start building those funds so that we can get to a place where we can actually start making a real difference. And that grant was the US DOT grant, and we got it. And University of Washington helped us build the data portal.
When was this? When was that grant? That was back in 2018, was it?
No, I think we applied in 2019, and we worked through it in 2020 during the pandemic. Oh my gosh, that was horrible.
Yeah.
But at least I got to work from home and continue to work on that grant in conjunction with University of Washington. And we managed to finish it, despite all of the challenges that were added on top of everything. We completed the grant successfully. Paul Teicher, he was phenomenal in helping us with that US DOT grant because he overseed the grant with us. And it turned out great. I can't wait for the data portal to go live. We're still working out some hiccups and some kinks, but we're really, really close to going live. And I'm excited because one of the things that I would love to do, which we didn't think about in the beginning, is tying the data from the MUS sensor somehow into the data portal. And if we can get that going, then that just creates another feature that we can use. And we've been talking about some ideas that we want to do, some projects that we want to work on, because I told these guys when I first met them, I was like, yeah, I got a couple irons in the fire, but I didn't tell them how many. I have a ton of ideas because when you're a first responder, you see this stuff firsthand. You see, you don't see the incident happen, but you are there real soon after it happens. And so in the frustration of being a first responder, I developed this sense for we need this, we need this, we need this. And then my husband still being a police officer, my brother-in-law, my sister just graduated from the academy, and being able to go, you're going to have patience in this job, and being able to tell her that, and then telling my husband the same thing, but he's 30 plus years of experience, and him hearing his frustrations with, man, I wish we had more manpower. Well, they're working on it. They're trying to get more manpower. I would love how I got certified as an EMT. There was a program developed for rural America to try to reduce that golden 10 minutes, that golden hour, and having more medics out in rural America. And that's something I would love to do, is reduce that time to a higher level of care. And there's other ideas that I have that I'm just looking forward to, and I can't wait to get to the next one.
It's great. If you could explain, we mentioned a little bit yesterday when we were talking about how the sort of setup, the political setup is with the roads. Because the roads.
Oh, yes.
So this is kind of complicated, yeah. Because
yes.
you think, well, the roads, you don't actually own the roads, but then you're responsible for the safety. So how does that all sort of work?
So, in the treaty of 1855 with Yakama Nation and the United States government, they implemented this sentence in Article 3 about having roads for access to not just the tribal members, but the public to go through the reservation. And then we had the Dawes Act, which allowed them to deem surplus land. So they gave us the reservation, and then basically they took it away and said, well, it's surplus land. And anyway, so the roads, they owned them, and they were supposed to operate them and maintain them. And then somewhere along the line, after Washington became a state, they said, oh, here, have the roads, and gave it to the county. And so, I'm looking at history going, whoa, time out. Because anytime the U.S. government or its entities, including the state, if they abandon property, it's supposed to revert back to the tribe. That didn't happen. Okay, we can't do anything about it now, but what we're trying to do is, we know the issues are there, but the county having maintenance and ownership, I guess, the right-of-way of the roads, and then the states having the easements and right-of-ways for the state highways through the reservation, and then the railroad has easements and some right-of-ways through the reservation as well. And so all these issues complicate everything, because not only do we have federal jurisdiction through the U.S. government, Bureau of Indian Affairs, sometimes BLM, sometimes Fish and Game. They have all these like right away on these roads. Then you have the cities, city of Union Gap, city of Wapato, city of Toppenish, city of Hera, city of Mapton. They have their jurisdictions on their territory within the reservation. And so that's some more hoops you have to jump through if you want to change something. And so it's a long, complicated process to try to make one improvement. For example, South Wapato and Progressive Road was a very extremely dangerous intersection. All we wanted to do was put up some new flashing solar powered stop signs so that when people would approach the intersection, it would start to go off and blink and let people know there's an intersection there. Well, then we found out we could buy the product, but we had to have the county install it because it's technically within their right-of-way.
Right.
And so it has to meet their standards and their policies and their procedures for, infrastructure that tells people, what to do at an intersection. So that's how we got the memorandum of agreement with the Yakama County. And, without the team of Yakama Nation DNR Engineering and all of us working together, that would have never happened. And so, because I can tell you the issues on the roads, the engineer can tell you the issues about the road, and Porsche GIS can tell you where the accidents are happening and where the clusters are happening. But it takes all of us working together to be able to show the county the picture that we see. And so once they were seeing the same thing and they're like, okay, you buy the infrastructure, we'll install it. So then it was like, finally.
Right. But why don't they buy? I mean, like, if it's their roads, isn't it their responsibility to make them safe? Why? There's a sort of like, it's difficult for me to get my head around that one.
Like all programs that are in rural America, underfunded. And
okay. So they do have some responsibility for the safety,
right,
but they don't have necessarily the funds to do that.
Yeah, and
so you're getting the funds from a different route.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we applied for grants. We have the 10-section intersection safety. So it's the 10 deadliest intersections. We applied for some funding. It was awarded to Yakama Nation. Dwayne is working with the county to get the infrastructure, to get it installed. And it wasn't until we started building this working relationship together and started collaborating, we didn't know that they were having issues with funding and that the PILT funding wasn't trickling down to them the way it was supposed to. Especially with COVID, everything got backed up, and so our frustrations were there, but the understanding wasn't there. The compassion wasn't there. And so through the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee, we're building an understanding of each other because we're having that person-to-person contact. We're having those conversations about, oh, you should hear my frustrations. Well, you want to hear my frustrations? And now we're getting some understanding of each other. And so that's a great thing, that the Tribal Council had the vision to say, make this committee and talk to each other and work together. And it's working. And it's great. And so it's great to be part of this whole process that's a lot bigger on the outside than it is if you're just looking from the inside. Or if you're just seeing me and hearing about what I'm talking about, but it's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger than just a single person. It's a whole team of people. Yeah.
And it goes wider. Does it go wider? Is this what you're doing replicatable for other tribes in North America?
Yes.
There's similar situations going on across it.
Oh, there's similar situations going across all 500 plus tribes in the United States. So that was one of the things when I came into this position, knowing about other tribes, because I've worked with other tribes before, knowing what some of their challenges are. So not all tribes have somebody like me working for them. And so that's why when I come into a project, I'm like, okay, I'm not looking for a cookie cutter. I'm not trying to create a cookie cutter. I'm trying to create a flexible, movable, adaptable platform or template that they can pick up and take to their tribe and manipulate it to adjust to what their needs are and what their challenges are and what their hoops are, because every tribe has a different government, has a different setup, so they have a whole set of different hoops that they have to jump through, because not all tribes are treaty tribes. And so I want it to be adaptable for those tribes so that they can pick up our project and say, hey, we want to do this. So, and then let them manipulate it the way they need to help their people and the people that drive through their reservation. Because all reservations, I said, except for I think the Morongo tribe, have public ability to drive through the reservation.
But you said that on your reservation, you have some particularly dangerous roads.
Oh yes.
And is that a common pattern on other reservations? Is there a reason why roads on reservations might be more dangerous than others?
A lot of the roads were built to a certain date, like maybe the late 70s, early 80s, and have not been updated. As most people in the U.S. know, there wasn't a lot of funding previously. And now all of a sudden we're getting this funding coming down the pipeline, with Pete Buttigieg and with the difference in government and them recognizing, hey, we need to take care of the infrastructure. Bridges are getting old. Bridges are collapsing. I remember reading in the news back east somewhere, a bridge collapsed. And I know that happened in Tacoma, like in, I think, the 50s or 60s, the bridge just gave way. And so you can't just build something and think it's going to last forever. You have to take care of it. And that's one of the things that, we as a tribe know. It got built, but it hasn't been updated. I mean, people here are talking about complete streets. I would just love to have maintenance and have streets that meet like the width standards. And then we'll worry about the sidewalks, and then we'll worry about everything else. There's got to be a compromise somewhere, because there's not an endless source of funding. And so, I've prioritized in my mind according to the maps that Portia makes, according to the reports that we get from the police, tribal police, county police, state police, the city police, what I get from Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, what I get from UW, compiling that all together, and then try to prioritize, okay, we've got this amount of funding, let's address this section, let's address this corridor. And that's one of the great things that coming here, teaming up with these people, meeting new people, is working with UW, working with AWASIAN, and now a new partner we have is AWS. Being exposed to technology, now I would love to create not just one smart corridor, but I'm thinking a corridor on Highway 97 first, then maybe a corridor on Lateral A, then maybe a corridor on Fort Road, and then a corridor on West Wapato Road, then on Branch Road, and then eventually the whole reservation floor, because the valley floor is 9,000 acres. The reservation itself is 1.2 million acres. The ceded territory is 12.89 million acres. And so what I would like to take care of first is the valley floor, the main roads, then the irrigation roads, and then eventually maybe the closed area roads, so that our forestry workers, our wildlife workers, our fisheries workers have better access to protect our wilderness territory and to protect the animals. And so, I have this sequence in my head of, okay, I'm here on the map, but that's where I want to go. That's the dream. And so, realistically, I know I can only go one step at a time.
And it's all about getting the data. That's the key to success, right? Getting really good, high quality data with no holes in it, so that you know where the dangerous places are, and you can begin to actually install or change roads or do things to actually make those dangerous spots safer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in December of 2021, a project that WashDOT and Yakama Nation collaborated on to put a roundabout at the absolute deadliest intersection on the reservation got installed. It was completed in December of 22. Since December of, or no, it was completed in December of 21. So from December of 21 till now, we've had an estimated 5 million plus individuals safely navigate through the roundabout without any incident. We've had 5 incidences that have occurred that were documented. They were minor injury or no injury. 5. At the deadliest intersection on the reservation when we installed a roundabout. And so, that's the perfect example of collaboration and working together to reduce fatalities is what WashDOT and Yakama Nation did, was install that roundabout. So now imagine we have another roundabout that's about ready to start at Jones Road and Highway 97. And then we got approved for 4 others. And LaRue Road and 97, where the must sensor is, that we installed as a pilot project at the University of Washington, which is monitoring the traffic, the volume, all of that, the weather, the humidity, line of sight, road surface conditions, is going to give us a before picture of that deadly intersection. And then when it gets a roundabout, give us the after data. And then when we can show that data to a grant application and those reviewers see the before and after, they're going to know if they fund us, it's a win-win, and that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And that's how the funding starts trickling down, is because if you haven't applied before, so when we were told when we applied for the USDOT grant, we were told that no other tribe had applied for that funding and no other tribe had been awarded that funding. And completing that project successfully, that tells them, okay, they're doers. They're gonna do what they say they're gonna do. And so that gives us that trust between us and them, going, okay, now we know if we fund them, they're gonna complete a project successfully. And we're trying to create projects that other tribes can use. And so to me, that's a win-win situation, because if I can help other tribes, Yakama Nation as a whole help another tribe, that just shows other tribes we can work together and we can do things together. And that's what I'm trying to do, is because I am the co-chair for the Transportation Committee under Affiliated Tribes Northwest Indians. They report directly to the National Congress of American Indians in DC. I'm also the regional rep for Intertribal Transportation Association. And that is a big region, Washington, Oregon, California, Alaska, and working with those tribes, helping give them a voice. And so, like I said, not all those tribes or corporations or villages have somebody to speak for them, because some tribes don't have very much funding. Some tribes have a lot of funding. And so if we can help each other in areas where, maybe they haven't worked yet, or they've worked in an area and I need help and they help me, that's what we need, to work together. And so we can survive together, because that's what tribes do, we adapt.
You mentioned just quite early on, you were talking about the sort of broken promises of the past. What was specifically the promises you were thinking of there?
So like in the treaty, education was promised, healthcare was promised, after elementary education was promised. Those things haven't really happened, and they're not the only ones breaking promises. There's some universities, when I was doing historical research in right-of-way, finding out that there are universities in the United States that promise free education to Native Americans, and they aren't keeping their promises. That's not very good. And we know that the U.S. has broken these promises. But we also know, as history has gone on from 1855, maybe the person in charge didn't tell the next person in charge these promises were there. And then they go to the next person, and they go to the next person, and the next person, and how many, different leaders have been there since 1855. So we know that we have to educate the government. We have to educate the cities. We have to educate the schools. We have to educate. It gets a little mind-numbing, but if we don't do it, then we're just allowing it to happen. And so that's what I do when I come to events like this, to people who may not know anything about tribal nations in the United States, or, governments like cities or states. They may not know. For instance, yesterday I met this gentleman who knew that there were tribes in Texas, but he didn't know what kind of tribes. And so he asked me, do you know what kind of tribes are in Texas? And I was like, yeah. There was the Kiowa, there was the Comanche, there was the Apache, there was the Tonkawa, there was the Wichita, all up here in the Northern Territory where we're at now. And so in tribal nations, we do land acknowledgements. And so when I got here, the first thing I did was say thank you to these tribes and this land, and told them that I'm here in my language, so that I could announce that I'm visiting. I mean to do no harm to the land or to the people or anything like that, because that's the kind of respect that First Nations and tribes have. We have that kind of respect. We don't go onto each other's land without permission.
And they I know very little about the tribal nations either. So the leaders, the responsibility of you and the other leaders of the tribe, how far does that reach within the territory? Is that responsible for the people that you say there's police force and other sort of things? How far does it go? And in terms of, because you have it's a sort of relationship with the federal government, but not with the state. It's with the federal government, your relationship.
Yeah, so Yakama Nation has 14 tribes and bands.
Yeah.
We have 14 elected tribal council persons. We have 3 general council persons, and those individuals are responsible. So the 3 general council elected officials are the voice for the people, the tribal membership. If there's something that's affecting the people as a whole, we go tell general council. Tribal council is responsible for running day-to-day business and day-to-day operations, and so they have separate committees underneath tribal council. So like my position reports directly to Roads Irrigation Land Committee, and so I let them know the projects I'm working on. I let them know about I got this grant, this is what I'm supposed to do, and so they just kind of watch and take monitor my progress, and then make sure that it's for the good of the entire tribe. And so not all tribes are treaty tribes. We also have our own tribal police department. We have our own court system. We have our own corrections facility. We have education department. We have health and wellness. We have behavioral health. We have all these different organizations, but we also have enterprises. So we have enterprises that are owned by the tribe, but they're a separate business. So the perfect example to talk about is Yakama Power. Yakama Power is a non-profit power company developed out of Yakama Nation. So it's a separate company, but it's owned by the tribe.
Yeah, at all levels.
Yes.
Amazing.
And so as a treaty tribe, we have a government-to-government relationship. So we work directly with the U.S. government. We are not required to work with the state, but yesterday was a perfect example. I ran into Roger Millar, from the Secretary of Transportation for Washington State, and I shook his hand and I told him I was planning this meeting and I welcomed to come to this meeting. He agreed to come to it. And so I'm trying to create a meeting so that Tribal Council can talk to the railroad, because that was another agreement that was broken. And so the railroad came, when it was being developed, the U.S. government and the railroad told the tribe for as long as their railroad runs through the reservation, there would be passenger rail service. And so I've been trying to educate Federal Railroad Administration. These were the promises that were made. I would like to create a meeting for Tribal Council to meet with you, and I can make that happen, because I know this is an issue under transportation. Talking directly with Roads Irrigation Land, letting them know this is the conversation I had so that they know what I'm doing. And I do not speak for the council. The council makes all the decisions. I just set up the meeting so that they can talk. And if that's something that needs to happen. And so I asked Roger, I said, I think you should come to this meeting because it affects Washington State. And so he's like, yeah, I'll be there. And so, it was just a chance opportunity like that to be able to create a positive approach to a situation that's not so great.
It's good. And Roger's a great guy. I've met him a couple of times. He's a nice guy. So yeah. And an event like this, that's the sort of connection that can happen, I suppose.
Yeah, and it was awesome because one of the staffs heard our presentation that myself, Way's son, and Adrian made from AWS, heard our presentation, told the CEO, Laura, of this organization and said, hey, you got to hear this great project that's going on. We need to talk with them further. We met with them last night. They agreed. They're going to come out to Yakama Nation. I'm so excited to have them, say, hey, we're willing to come out. And I said, I'll give you a tour. And they said, sure. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, just chance opportunities like this, being in a certain place at a certain time and having things happen like this is positive for Native Americans across the board, not just for Yakama Nation.
That's great. Wow. I got loads of material there.